Hello everybody and welcome back to the shop. I'm going to do a series of videos that are aimed at you woodworkers out there that practice your craft using power tools and sandpaper, but would like to start getting into hand tools like scrapers and chisels and particularly hand planes, but you're not quite sure where to start. If this describes you, and I hope that it does, this series of videos will hopefully help you make an informed decision a little bit quicker. So in this video I'm just going to explain to you why you don't need to buy a fancy hand plane. The second video, we're going to take a look at the Stanley Baileys, which are generally regarded as high quality, and take a look at the features that are in it. And we're going to compare and contrast that to a couple other hand planes. And then finally, in the third video, I'm going to go through my collection and show you my secondary and tertiary brand hand planes and how their features stack up to the Stanley Bailey. So let's get into it. So here's a small assortment of simple planes. But basically, these planes are all made up of essentially 4 parts. This one, being wood, only has 3. But if I take apart this 101, you'll see that the lever cap has a screw on it. There's 2 parts. And then there's the iron and the body of the plane. 4 parts. And all of these planes, when tuned up, will work perfectly fine. In fact, if you're a fan of my videos, you've seen me use this little guy here many times. Very handy plane for certain applications. And there are occasions I use this number 75, a bullnose. It's not the easiest plane to use, but again, it does do what you ask it to do under the right circumstances. And I used to carry this 110 in my truck for years. This was my go-to hand plane when I needed a hand plane for sort of handyman course work. So keeping these 2 hand planes in mind, I would like to submit to you that we need 2 things, and we have to satisfy 2 conditions to have a functioning hand plane. And the 2 things you need are the body and the iron. And the 2 conditions that need to be met is that the iron must be sharp, and the second condition is that the iron is held firmly, sorry for my poor penmanship, and securely. If you have these 2 things and meet these 2 conditions, probably have a hand plane that's going to work fine. So here's a list that I put together that I think the average person, pretty all-encompassing of what you might do to turn your average hand plane into a first-class user. And I'm just going to briefly go over some of these. There are tons of videos out there that will give you far more detail than I want to give, but I just want to touch on them all. So first you have the cleaning. It could be as simple as getting the dirt and the grime off. Some people like to shine and polish and remove the patina, and other people, you'll get as far maybe touching up the paint or perhaps even refinishing the japanning or the paint. Then you get to the cutting business. So you need to have a sharp iron, and when we say sharp, we mean razor sharp or as sharp as a brand new utility knife blade, something like that. A lot of people like to flatten the frog face and tune the seat of the frog. Some people like to file the mouth. I have never personally done this that I can think of. Okay, then with the chip breaker and the cap iron, it's important that the cap iron be the correct shape and that the leading edge intersects the leading edge of the iron nice and securely and flat. So there's typically not a lot of tuning up that needs to be done, but if your cap iron is severely out of whack, you might just have a problem. Similarly, the lever cap, when you cinch it down, it puts pressure on the cap iron and the iron to make sure that the iron is very securely attached to the body of the plane. Moving on to the furniture, and for that we mean the knob and the tote. And some people will strip and refinish them completely. It's repair, rebuild, maybe it's got a chip taken out of it, or hole or a divot. For the body of the plane, a lot of people will flatten the sole. I personally find myself getting a little more dubious as to how flat the sole needs to be. Other people will talk about easing the edges and then squaring the cheeks. Then finally there's the assembly. You oil and wax all surfaces. Then there's the frog placement in the seating and the mouth. And then finally there's the iron placement. For the hand plane to work well, the iron's got to be sitting just right in terms of depth and lateral adjustment. So now what I want to do, of these 17 things or so that you need to do to turn your hand plane into a top-notch user, let me put it on a pie chart. And this may be a bit of an exaggeration, but this whole area here, this is all sharpening the iron, and all these other 16 things fits in here. So said another way, if you're not able to achieve a really sharp iron, probably not going to be a very satisfied hand plane or chisel user. And if I could share, this is exactly what happened to me. Many years ago, I went out and bought this beautiful Lie-Nielsen block plane, and right out of the box, it was ready to go. And I went down into my workshop, and just for the fun of it, I started planing, and it was very enjoyable, very therapeutic. But I found out the hard way that, you only have to plane maybe 10 or 15 minutes, maybe 40, 50 linear feet of wood before the iron starts to get a little dull. Then I found myself pressing down a little harder, and a little while later I found myself advancing the blade a little bit and pushing down, and soon it became apparent that the iron just wasn't sharp anymore. So then I had to figure out how to sharpen, and I had to climb the expertise ladder, so to speak, and it took me a while. But today the good news is there are lots of tools out there to turn the novice into somebody that can get a very fine edge on a blade. So as a result, it happened to me. My Lie-Nielsen here kind of became a bit of a casualty in my shop. I usually ended up reaching for my 110 here, even though it's a much simpler plane. It was easy to get this iron sharp enough to make it a decent user, where the Lie-Nielsen, I feel as though I always had to get it a little bit extra sharp, and I didn't quite have the skills to make that convenient. So hopefully this tale will prevent some of you out there from making a similar mistake. Let me try to do one more charter graph to illustrate the point of this video. Let me draw a line here, and this line represents quality of a given hand plane. And when I say quality, I'm not talking about complexity. I'm talking about a hand plane for what it is. It's made very well. And I would say on this sliding scale, I'm going to put about right here. These are the Baileys, because they're pretty well made, and for the better part of a century, the Stanley Baileys were the planes that the professionals would go out and get, and there were some planes that are thought to be generally better than Baileys, but not many, and there's a lot of other planes out there that are thought to be not as good as Baileys. And what I would say to you is that on this sliding scale, if this is the real junk down here, somewhere around here into higher quality are planes that you can probably make decent users. Now let's add another dimension to this. We'll make it a chart. And over here, you've got price, excuse my poor penmanship, and you've got low price down here and high price up here. And you would expect that as quality goes up, the price goes up, right? Basically saying that price is another way of buying quality. And this may be true in the new hand plane market. There's certainly a lot of low-end planes down here that I think the quality is thought to be pretty dubious, and there are certainly very high-end planes that are pretty pricey. But if we just focus on the used market, which is what the topic of this video is all about, I think you'll find the curve follows more something like this. And the points of this curve is there's a lot of hand planes out there where the prices can be had quite affordably. And as you get into the Baileys, some of them are demanding a pretty high price, but not all of them. And there's a lot of high-end planes out there, a lot of collectible, highly sought-after planes that are probably commanding premium over what they might have sold for new. And the point of this video is you want to hunt around for these guys out here because they're very affordable and they can be turned into really solid users without a huge outlay of cash. So it's a pretty low-risk investment to see if these guys might be a good addition to your workshop. So one final note, I see lots of hand planes out there in the wild that I would consider to be definitely not premium planes, yet they seem to be commanding premium prices kind of in this area. So you have to shop around. I mean, it might take several weeks, even a few months, depending on where you live, but in my experience, there are lots of affordable, decent quality planes out there. It's also a common belief that many of these older tools are superior quality to what you can get today. And I think there's sort of a virtue, if that's the right word, for keeping a useful tool out of the landfill and in the hands of somebody in a workshop that appreciates using it. So I'm encouraging you to try to give a second life to a vintage plane. Well, I'm going to end this one here because it's getting kind of long. Let me know if you think my arguments make any sense. I appreciate your views and thank you if you've made it all the way to the end of this guy. I hope I've made my point and you're interested enough to check out the next video where I take the time to give you a close look at this Stanley Bailey as a plane to judge others against. Then I'll give you a closer look at these 4 off-brand planes, 3 of which are everyday users in my shop and generally have a reputation by others to be avoided. In the 3rd video of this series, I'll go over a few more hand planes. So thanks for checking out my videos and channel, and as I always say, take care, stay safe, and I'll see you on the next one.